This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Go to our website at wdtatpodcast.com and click on support to learn how you can be part of this effort to learn how to have better conversations, increase compassion, and build bridges, not walls. You can make a one-time donation or become a patron for as little as $1 a month and receive patron-only benefits. Thanks to all of our patrons at any level for your support. We really couldn't do this without you. Now let's get into the interview. As we start a new year, many of us are thinking about diets and health and how we can change our habits. It's a good time to talk about a lot of the ways that our relationship to our bodies and food is not so healthy. In this episode, I talked to Athina Crilley about her journey with an eating disorder, how we think about our bodies, and our need to have control in our lives. Welcome to the podcast where we talk about things we're not supposed to, learn how to have difficult conversations, and talk to people about what makes them different. This is the We Don't Talk About That with Lucas Land podcast, where we do talk about that with me, Lucas Land.
It's never the right place or time. It's imperceptible to the eye. It's never the right place or time.
My guest today is Athina Crilley. She's an online coach at Athina Crilley Coaching and host of the Finding My Fit podcast. Finding My Fit brings you a weekly dose of up-to-date information on various topics around health, fitness, nutrition, mindset, and positivity to help you move forward towards a healthy and happy lifestyle. Welcome to the podcast, Athina.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. One of the topics I've wanted to talk about for a while, that's one that I think is hard for people to talk about, and one that we avoid talking about is eating disorders, and maybe disordered eating is another way to think about it. So, but first, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into working in health and fitness with your podcast and with your coaching.
Of course. So my name is Athina, as you said. I currently live in London, in England. I'm originally from a place called Blackpool, which most of your listeners, if they're in America, probably never heard of. It's just a small town in the northwest of England. Okay. And I moved down to London last year, just after I finished my degree. So I studied a degree in biochemistry. I don't actually work in biochemistry at the moment, but I've got that degree in case I do want to in the future. So in terms of my current work, I actually work full-time in the NHS at the moment. So I work at my local hospital, and then on the side, as like a secondary job, I do have some online coaching where I will coach people in health, training, and nutrition. In terms of my own health and fitness kind of journey, I danced as a child up to about the age of 18 or 19. And I did lots of shows. I was really into doing performances at my local theatre. And I kind of stopped dancing when I went to uni at the age of 19. I just, I just kind of stopped doing it because I'd moved away from home, weightlifting and going to the gym. And I then decided in my final year of uni that I wanted to study my personal training qualification. And me being me, I decided to start that qualification whilst also doing my final year exams. So I somehow managed to get through all of that. And I'm now a level 3 qualified personal trainer, but I work mainly online. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
That's awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about your journey with your eating disorder. I think it's something I was thinking about this before, we got online together, and I remember as a kid, I think I'm a bit older than you. We don't have to talk about how much older. I remember there was, I think it was either a made-for-TV movie or something like that. There was a movie I remember watching about Karen Carpenter, and that was when I really realized she was a drummer and singer in the Carpenters with her and her brother. This is a band in like the 60s. So
Yes, I do
dating
know.
myself.
I do know that group, actually. I've heard of them.
Yeah, but that's the first time I remember hearing about eating disorders at all, or ever, being exposed to it. And, I do have a very good friend who is recovering from anorexia, and it's really hard, and it's a big struggle. So tell us about your journey, with your eating disorder, realizing that you needed help, and just tell us a little bit about what it's like. I think a lot of people don't understand it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's quite a lot to cover in just one question. It's very, they're all very complex, of course, but
Sure.
I'll try and give you like a quick overview. I'm just in the process of publishing my own book all about my recovery. So, I've written like a whole book about it.
Yeah.
Because I really do think it's something that a lot of people are very unaware about what exactly they are, how they affect the person, and really what to do or how to help support somebody that's going through something like this. And so me personally, I suffered with anorexia. I was first diagnosed at the age of 13, and I would say I wasn't fully recovered until the age of 20. So 7 years, which is quite a long time. I think most people tend to recover after maybe a few years, but for me it was 7. So summed up, I guess, really it first started, I would say my thoughts about the way I looked and my body first started when I was about 11 or 12. And I always remember being in my front room at home and watching, I don't know whether this is still a channel anymore, but MTV Music, and they had all the music videos on that channel. And I remember watching them and watching these like famous singers and thinking, oh, like, why don't I look like them? Like, they have such amazing bodies, and it made me feel really like just insecure, and it made me really look at the way I was. And I decided, like, I wasn't overweight, but I would say I had a little bit of like puppy fat, like I wasn't like skinny, but I wasn't massively overweight. But I definitely thought, right, I want to lose a bit of weight. So I bought the Wii Fit, if that's even the thing anymore, but the Wii Fit was like the big thing at the time. So I bought one of those and started using that like every day when I got home from school. And at the same time, I started very slowly just reducing my food intake, just little bits at a time. It was nothing major at the start. And then as I started to lose a little bit of weight, it's like I kind of got like a taste for the weight loss. And I thought, right, I can push this even further. And I started exercising even more, to the point where it would be hours and hours after school. I reduced my food intake to a lot less than I needed. And I was losing weight quite quickly at this point. And it did really get to the point where it was an obsession. And I think that's really where the line goes from disordered eating to an eating disorder, because it really started to affect my psyche. I was, for example, if my parents stopped me exercising because they said, oh, you've been on there for 3 hours now, come off, then I would start shouting. I'd be like, no, I need to carry on. And it was really at that point that it started to become a problem. And I would say maybe like 5 months after I'd initially started, exercising and trying to lose weight, I'd lost around 3.5 stone within like 5 months. And that was quite a lot. That was about a third of my body weight at the time. Wow. So my mum was like, right, you need to go to the doctors, because she knew at that point that I clearly had like a problem. And it was, there wasn't much more that my parents could do. And they thought, right, we need some kind of professional help. So she forced me to go to the doctor, and he admitted me to the local pediatric ward, like pretty much there and then. So that was the first of 5 hospital admissions that I had. The final 2 admissions were in specialist eating disorder units, in hospitals called Priory hospitals. I don't know whether they are worldwide or just in the UK, but they're kind of like specialist mental health hospitals. And so, yeah, that was like a kind of a quick overview. And when it comes to my recovery, I wouldn't really say in particular the hospital admissions really helped me that much. I feel like that kind of system of going into hospital and being on bed rest and being force fed in a way, I feel like that system works for some people, but for me personally, I don't find that helped me at all, because ultimately anorexia is a psychological disorder, and if you don't want to recover, it doesn't matter how many people are force feeding you or how many people are telling you to stop exercising. It really needs to come from within. And I wouldn't say it was until I got to uni at the age of 19 that I really started to see these small changes that led to my recovery at the end.
Yeah. So what are some of the myths or the things that people believe about eating disorders? If they have an idea about what they are and what they're like, what are some of those myths that you hear from people about anorexia or bulimia or different eating disorders?
I definitely think a huge myth about eating disorders is that they have to be visible, especially when it comes to anorexia. That I feel like people assume that if you're not really underweight, then you're not anorexic, or if you have been anorexic and you've managed to put a bit of weight on, then you're recovered. Like I always remember my grandma asking my mum throughout my illness, oh, is she eating now? And that is such a naive, simplistic way to think about it, because yes, I was eating, otherwise I would have died very quickly. I was eating, but it was very, very minimal amounts. And just because I eat a little bit more, it doesn't mean that I'm recovered. And that's a massive, massive misconception.
Right.
And I think another misconception is that eating disorders happen in isolation. So, you're anorexic, that's it. Whereas most of the people I have met that have been suffering with an eating disorder often have a multitude of other mental health issues, such as depression, anxiety, paranoia, PTSD. They very rarely kind of occur in isolation, despite what most people seem to think. So yeah, I think they're probably the main 2. I guess for anorexia, there's also the misconception that the only issue is food, and the only issue is that they're not eating enough. And in reality, anorexia tends to stem from something within, like internal issues, or a traumatic event in that person's life can often cause them to spiral into an eating disorder, or an inner lack of confidence or lack of control of their environment. It's often something internal as opposed to just an issue with food.
Yeah, my friend who is still recovering from anorexia talks about that. That food is really just the means to the end, right? And it may be that you're trying to control something in your life, or there could be a lot of different reasons for it, but food is almost the symptom, really, of other things 100%. That are. Yeah. So what are some of those different reasons? I mean, is there one more common reason that people have eating disorders, or what are some of the reasons and causes, the psychological reasons?
Yeah, honestly, there are so many different reasons why people develop eating disorders. A
Hmm.
lot of the time, it can be through something traumatic happening. So, for example, if someone has a death of a really close relative, that can cause someone to develop an eating disorder because
Mm.
it's traumatic and they might feel out of control because that person is died and there was
Hmm.
nothing they could do about it. So they turned to food and exercise as a way to control something.
Hmm.
So it can be a traumatic event. It can be something as simple or as mundane as just having a lack of confidence. For me,
Hmm.
I can't really pinpoint exactly what caused me to spiral into an eating disorder because at the time there was nothing massive, there was no massive event that happened. It
Hmm.
just was me
Hmm.
wanting to lose weight, just taking it way too far and becoming obsessive with it. And it can just be something like that where it's just like a slow progression into the eating disorder. Or
Hmm.
it could even be, there are studies that are suggesting it could be genetic,
Hmm.
which is quite difficult to study, of course, because, you how do you actually study whether someone's genetics has caused them to have an eating disorder? You can't really
Hmm.
study that very reliably, but
Uh-huh.
that is a possibility as
Yeah.
well.
Huh. Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. I do think that it's really helpful to recognize that it's not one thing. I think people probably have sort of a conception of what someone with an eating disorder is like and why they have the eating disorder. And as you're saying, it's really important to recognize there are a lot of different reasons, from something really traumatic to, as you said, the messages you were getting and having this lack of confidence in yourself led you to wanting to change yourself, and then becoming very like obsessed with it. And uh, all of those, it does seem like there's this element of control for one reason or another. Would you say that's kind of a core aspect of eating disorders, that it's a trying to control something in your life for whatever reason?
Yeah, 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
And that is
Okay.
something that I've noticed with every single person that I've interacted with, whether that be someone in hospital, whether that's family friends that might be going through the same thing. It always seems to center around having to control things. And
Mm.
when I was going through my eating disorder, it wasn't even like me that I was trying to control. It was, I also found this urge to control everything around me. So
Mm.
everything, even things like what time the family ate dinner, or like
Mm.
what time my dad would go out to work, or like I would try
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, it's really hard to explain. It's like I would feel like I wanted to control what everyone else did around me, and it sounds really like weird and narcissistic, and I don't know. It was more like it just stemmed from this feeling of just everything being so unpredictable and so out of control, and the only things I truly could control about myself was the way I looked, the food I ate, and
Mm-hmm.
the exercise I did. So it really does stem from this wanting to control, like 100%.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I think that can maybe help people have a little more empathy and understanding for people that are struggling with an eating disorder, because I know I haven't had an eating disorder, but I know that I want to control things in my life in unhealthy ways sometimes, that I want my kids to be quiet, at a certain time while I'm recording a podcast, or I don't know what, and that it's often unhealthy, right? I have an unhealthy need to control certain aspects of my life, and I've also noticed that it happens when other parts of my life feel out of control. So if I'm really stressed about work and other things, feeling overwhelmed by the things I need to do, sometimes I'll clean. I'll just like create order where I can create order because I can control this aspect of my life while the rest of my life feels a little bit out of control. So I think that's a great way for people to maybe understand and feel some empathy for people struggling with an eating disorder. Is we're all doing that in some way or another, I think. Maybe that's me projecting my own issues on everybody else, but needing to control things in our lives seems like a very common, thing that people go through. So, what are some other things?
Yeah, honestly,
go ahead.
It's something that everyone experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
I was going to say it's something that everyone experiences, and I feel like with anorexia, it's just that need for control amplified by 1,000, and the thing that they're projecting on is the food and their exercise habits. But it is something that I think everybody will be able to empathize with.
Yeah. Well, what are, for people who, maybe they haven't experienced this with someone close to them, it's not something they're very familiar with. And, maybe if they, somebody shared with them that they were struggling with an eating disorder, they would feel pretty overwhelmed about what to do. What do you recommend that people can do when they find out somebody's struggling with an eating disorder? First answer that, and then I have another question related to that.
So
yeah.
If you realize that someone close to you is going through an eating disorder, I think the number one thing is to just be there for them and show your love, show your support. And honestly, it really does, it makes the world of difference having a support network when you are going through something so difficult, because anorexia, I mean, I can only really speak for anorexia, not the other eating disorders, because I haven't suffered with those. But in particular with anorexia, it really does make you feel isolated. You feel like nobody likes you. You feel like all you have is your eating disorder. So having people around you that are showing you, no, I'm here for you, I'm going to support you no matter what you're going through right now, it really does make a world of difference. If you can access, then some books about eating disorders, whether that's buying the paperback or reading it online. Books like the one that I'm writing myself, where a sufferer is writing about their own experiences, because it will really help you get into that person's mindset, because that's something that's almost impossible to do if you have never suffered with it yourself. But reading books and educating yourself about that particular eating disorder is going to help you just realize what that person's going through, and know that if that person is not in their usual self and they seem a bit different from how they used to be, it's the eating disorder, it's not them. The eating disorder really can change your personality completely and make you very introverted and very just not the way you used to be. And it's important to recognize that that person is just struggling at that time, and that might be why they seem different. So yeah, I think really just showing your support and educating yourself.
Yeah, that's really interesting with, personality changing. That's something that also happens with depression, that people struggle with how to respond or how to help someone that's struggling with depression, because they seem so different, and it's hard to know how to respond, and you just want someone to be their old self or be, who you knew them to be. And it's really compassion and being able to show somebody that, it's okay that they're not the same. You're still there for them. You're still going to show your support, like you were saying. I think that change in personality can be something that's really difficult for people when people are struggling with something like an eating disorder.
Definitely, yeah.
My other question is something I think we don't think about on the day-to-day going about our lives when we're not necessarily confronted with somebody that's struggling with an eating disorder. we probably say a lot of things that we don't think about related to food and health and appearance. What are some of those things that you would say people need to think about, avoiding saying certain things and being more careful about the messages that they're kind of putting out there, especially when someone, may be struggling and they don't realize it? So what are some of those things that we maybe say but we don't think about that are really harmful?
Yeah, I could think of so many, honestly. I think the worst one for me that really, really triggered me when I was ill, and it really made me, I just hated it, is when people would say, "Oh, I've not eaten all day. I'm so hungry." Because although they're saying they haven't eaten all day, they probably have eaten, but they just mean they've not had anything substantial. But they probably have eaten something, like, even if it's just a piece of toast. But me, my anorexic self would take that very literally and be like, wow, so that person hasn't eaten anything today. So that means I need to do that. That means that's normal for me to do. And it's like this little like competition that you get in your head, like, oh, that person's not eating, so I'm not going to eat. And it's really, to that person saying in the comment, it's nothing. But then to the anorexic person, they will take that on board and really think about that. So that is definitely something that people say all the time, that really they should try and avoid if they're around someone that does have an eating disorder. And the second thing really would be anything to do with, oh, I feel fat, or oh, I look well bloated, or oh, does this dress make me look really fat? Just anything around, focusing around the way you look, because like it's just shifting the focus right onto body image and looks and weight and fat, and that's really not what someone wants to focus on when they're going through an eating disorder, especially if they're trying to recover, because it's just perpetuating this idea that we should be focusing on those things. So yeah, definitely avoiding anything to do with that.
Yeah, those are good. Yeah, this is something, I was on your podcast, and we were talking a lot about my family and our kids and ways that we're trying to raise our kids differently. And, and we talked a lot about food and food issues and trying to give kids positive messages that we often don't realize the messages we're giving our kids about how they relate to food. And then also, as you're saying, the things we say that give them messages about how they relate to their own bodies, their own appearance, what they look like. I don't know, what messages did you get about that growing up? I mean, you mentioned MTV. Were there other things that you remember hearing about either food or appearance that like really stuck with you?
Yeah, so me growing up as a teenager, I feel like nowadays there's a lot more focus on body positivity, and that we don't all have to look a certain size and a certain way. We're definitely shifting as a society a lot more towards accepting a wider variety of bodies, which is amazing, because that might help prevent more eating disorders occurring. Because when I was growing up, there wasn't really any of that body positivity kind of movement. It was very much all of the pop stars and the singers and the people that were famous looked a certain way, and they always had amazing bodies, amazing skin, and amazing hair. And it's I feel like that adds so much pressure, especially as a teenager, onto you, because they're your role models at that time, so you aspire to be like them and look like them, and you think, maybe if I look that way, that's what will make me successful, and that's what will make people like me. Whereas now, like I said, there's a massive variety of role models, and they don't all look the same. So I do like that there's been that big shift, especially in the past few years, and hopefully it will continue to the point where children aren't growing up with all of this pressure to look that one particular way.
Yeah. I did an episode on sex with a sex therapist named Julie Jeske, and one of the things that she has a podcast called Swoon, which I've recommended a few times. And one of the things that they talk about in terms of bodies with sex is that bodies are weird. Like they're all different and they're all, and I really appreciate that. That I think we need to celebrate that and really make it normal that, bodies are just weird when we think about it, and kind of step back from a little bit from all of the cultural things we've been given and just try to detach and think about bodies. Like they're just weird and they come in all shapes and there's all different parts to bodies and they don't always match up the way you think they're supposed to and that's just part of life, right? Because we've all been given whatever genetics were handed down to us plus the lives that we've lived and here we are in the bodies that we have, and that's just the way that it is. And being a little more okay with that, and even if you want to be more healthy, but doing it from a perspective of for myself, not for other people or for like an appearance or something like that, just because I want to feel good maybe, or things like that. Anyways, when you were talking to artists came to mind that I really have enjoyed a lot lately. One is Billie Eilish, who was homeschooled and may have even been unschooled. I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to check into that. But I love the way that she has addressed this head on in some ways, and in other ways she's just been herself. And she kind of wears more baggy outfits and isn't putting the focus on her appearance in terms of her body and what her body looks like. And she's this incredibly amazing, successful artist. And the other one is Lizzo, who the cover of her album is her, sitting naked, and she's a large African-American woman. And I just think it's so awesome the way that artists and other people are, as you said, like, taking on this movement toward body positivity, and really owning it and putting it out there for people. Because when you were growing up and when I was growing up, those options and those messages were not out there. And so hopefully we are moving in a better direction.
Yeah, I really do think we are. And it's really nice to see, because like you said, everybody's different, everybody has a different body, everybody has a different style, and we don't all have to conform to this one ideal. Mm-hmm. We're all different.
Yeah. Well, Athina, I like to wrap up my episodes with two things, going out and going deeper. So our going out is an action step that we want to recommend to listeners, something they could do about this issue or on this topic. And then going deeper might be a resource, a book, a movie that we can recommend for people to check out if they want to go deeper in understanding this. And I'll go first. I'll give you a second to think about your two things.
Yeah, of course.
Going out, I really appreciated talking about things that we need to think about what we're saying. And so I want to recommend just to be more aware of comments that we make that are related to appearance or weight in particular. And just to think about other things that we can say or other ways that we can talk about how we feel, like you mentioned, being hungry, or if we're not feeling good a certain day, how we can talk about that without shaming ourselves or putting, the emphasis on appearances and weight, both for ourselves and for the people around us to hear that. And so I want to recommend for people to just be mindful of that. I think it also hopefully creates a safer space for people who are struggling to talk to you. I think when we say things like you were mentioning before, we're not being very open for people who are struggling to talk to us and see us as somebody they can lean on or they could come to for help. My going deeper, I'm gonna go back to the Karen Carpenter. I think it was called the Karen Carpenter Story. I'm a huge Carpenters fan. I grew up listening to the Carpenters. And I just remember that movie really affecting me. So I'm going to dig up a link to the Karen Carpenter Story and share that. That's something people could check out, because her story is one that really does highlight the effects of anorexia, the damage, and she eventually died from that disease. So Athina, what are your two things, going out and going deeper?
Yeah, so my going out, I would say, so anybody listening to this, try and find different role models. So don't just have one role model where it's, a really pretty pop star that has an amazing body and looks, that one ideal way. Try and look for role models in all different places and make them diverse and unique, and just try and broaden your perspective in that sense, so that you're not always exposing yourself to that same ideal, because that is really going to help you realize that we're all different, and it will help you learn to accept yourself for who you are and the way you look, and realize that everybody is unique. We're not all going to look the same. And my going deeper is, I think if you are interested in eating disorders, or if you do know somebody that is going through an eating disorder, then definitely buy one or two books, whether that is someone's particular story or whether that is one of those kind of self-help or advice books on how you can support someone with an eating disorder, because I know my parents bought quite a lot of those, and they said they really help to put them, transport them into the mind of the sufferer, because that is something that's quite difficult to do unless you've been there yourself, or unless you've read quite a lot about it. So I would definitely recommend checking out some books or some online resources.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Athina, thanks so much for spending time with me today. Where can people find you and what you're up to online?
Thank you. So my Instagram for my kind of personal / fitness content is just my name. It's at Athina Crilley. I also have an Instagram for my podcast, which is Finding My Fit Podcast. And I have an email for the podcast, which is findingmyfitpodcast@gmail.com. If anyone wants to send me any questions or any suggestions or just any feedback. And I also do have a YouTube channel if people want to check me out on there. It's just my name again, Athina Crilley.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And I'll put all of those in the show notes so people can find you, and look forward to more from you and your podcast and on YouTube. Thanks,
Perfect.
Athina.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with the handle @WDTAT Podcast. You can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Hope Fellowship Mennonite Church for their generous support of the podcast. Also, many thanks to Neil Curran and Infielder for the use of their music. You can find more of their music online at infielder.bandcamp.com. Until next time, keep showing up and keep being brave.
What are you gonna do?
Que le vaya bien.